Hello and good morning to everyone. Hope everyone is doing safe. I am Hadizat Avoswahijibo, the host of the last webinar series organized by the 11-11-12 Foundation. Today happened to be the last webinar series, as I earlier said, on when the environment fights back, preparing a legal perspective. But remember, we've had about 3 other webinar series along the course of this program. The first was on environmental laws and policies. The second was on policy formulation and implementation. The third on COVID-19 and the environment, the power of technology and green bond, financing opportunities, and the economy. And lastly, when the environment fights back, creating a legal perspective. With me today are my panelists. I have Mr. Ixel Halgren from the Swedish Embassy. He is a senior program officer at the Swedish Embassy on environment and climate. We also have Mr. John Davko, who would be a bit late. He's a senior lecturer from the Ghanaian Institute of Management and Public Administration. And lastly, but not the least, we have Dr. Sunday Fabemi, a senior lecturer from the University of Ibadan. You're all welcome to the program, sirs. First, now I would like to ask to Mr. Ixel Halgren. We know Sweden is a well-developed country, but also one of the most advanced in terms of environment and climate change. So tell us, how do you guys go about doing this?
Okay, can you hear me? Let me put on my video. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Can you see me? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, so I mean, Sweden has a very clear, strong plan for tackling climate change and environmental issues. And I was thinking today maybe I could give a brief presentation. I prepared a PowerPoint to just show you guys a new kind of climate act or climate law that was passed in Sweden in 2017 and enforced 2018. So it's quite new and in order to strengthen our climate policies. Would that be okay? Or do you want, maybe we can do a round of presenting everyone, saying hello first and then I can go, or?
Yes, I think it would be nice to share that act towards the end of the program, like a takeaway for all of us to ponder on.
Okay, yeah, sure. Okay, well, do you want to move on to the next speaker, or?
Yes, I will. We'll come back to you. You're not running anyway. All right, Miss Dr. Sunday. Today's webinar is centered on when the environment fights back. What do you understand by that phrase?
Yeah, thank you very much. I hope you can hear me.
Loud and clear.
So my video is not on?
Not yet.
All right, but my video is not on. I thought that we put in a video. Yes. Well, the truth is that when the environment fights back, it's going to be a very big disaster for all of us, because the truth is that we all depend on the environment for our survival. So, and that means we have to do all that must be done to ensure that we still have the environment. Otherwise, it's like an attempt to commit suicide. So to have environment fighting us back. So, and that's why in Nigeria, we have been able to put up, the government have put up a lot of policies and laws to ensure that our environment is sustainable. Otherwise, it will be a disaster for us. That's my brief comment. But like the last speaker said, I also have my papers on environmental laws and policies, which I think if the time permits me, I should be able to probably go through it so that we can now discuss later and probably have a question and answer as far as this yeah. Thank you.
No problem. But talking about the environment being sustainable, you made a sentence not so long ago that the Nigerian government has been trying to put in place policies to ensure that environment is sustainable. What is the relationship between sustainability and environmental policies?
Yeah, that's a very good question. You see, the sustainability of the environment is to ensure that the environment continue to be available for all of us. And when we talk of sustainable development, we are not focusing on the immediate generation, but we are thinking of even the succeeding generation. So the future generations will also be able to benefit from some of the things that the environment is offering and which we are enjoying now. So we have to ensure that there is need for law and policy to ensure that the resources within the environment is not exhausted and is available for the incoming generation to also take benefit of. So that is the essence of environmental sustainability.
All right. So, Mr. Axel, back to you. We know that the issue of environmental issues have been here for quite a while. It didn't just start, and we could say like there have been policies, or would I say mini policies, to kind of safeguard the environment right from our local communities of our forefathers, but it just wasn't enlarged into laws and policies. And then the first movement to would say towards environmental laws and policies would be the UNEP movement we had in 1972, which is now called the World Environment Day, June 5th, 1972. What methods do you think your country have been able to adopt to put them at that hallmark of environmental sustainability and economic development?
Sorry, can you repeat the question? What methods or what policies?
Yeah, methods.
Okay. Well, I mean, methods, policies. I mean, in Sweden, the key policy and law is that we had a carbon tax initiated in the 90s that has been very important for Sweden, the Swedish economy, to be able to curb carbon emissions and kind of drive that transition toward cutting carbon emissions. Because if you don't tax carbon emissions, you know, the incentives for the industries will not be there. And yeah, I will go into a little bit depth later on the Swedish context of how we now try to make it even stronger and make the government more held accountable to actually follow up on our international commitments to the Paris Agreement, for example, which is this new climate.
Okay, so
yes, sorry.
you're talking about taxing the government and public organizations that own and businesses that, of course, carry out their act on the environment. What role do you think the issue of environmental insurance plays here?
Sorry, environmental insurance.
Yes.
You mean from insurance companies or?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I did a speech not long ago talking about climate change and for example, in the Nigerian context. And I think one of the issues is that insurance companies here, they have not really adapted to insure environmental impacts, such as, and speaking of climate change, such as floods and droughts and unforeseeable externalities related to climate change. And so I think there needs to be a kind of an overhaul of the insurance business because climate change is not something that you can look at, for example, in isolation. It affects basically everyone and everything, from heat waves to floods to droughts. And in the Nigerian context, of course, agriculture would be the most clear direct impact, where the environment can just this year ruin 25 or 30% or something around that number of the rice crops in just a few months ago. Remember that. So insurance companies needs to and that's part of climate adaptation, for insurance companies to actually incorporate environmental disasters for even this, the smallholder farmers and small businesses.
All right. So, Mr. Sunday, we know that over the years, there's been a lot of clamor for environmental sustainability, climate change. We've seen a lot of people, NGOs, CSOs, individuals coming together, lending their voices, their support, their finance to achieving this goal and ensuring that environment is sustainable. But there's this argument that mostly comes from business owners. They will tell you, if you want me to go sustainable, what's going to be the impact on my business? Don't you think going sustainable is going to affect development? Why do we always have this controversy around environmental policies and regulations?
Well, Thank you so much. I think there is no, if the business people can understand this, there is no anymore, they don't lose anything because when you are when you are in business and you are trying to your primary interest is to make money and more money. That's the business is even so is going to extinction. So most often than not, most of the law that have been put in place is to ensure that even those in business they comply with these laws. For example, if you take the one of the major law now on environment and development is the Environmental Impact Assessment Act. I know the bottom line of that law is that it was taken out from the provision of Principle 17 of the Rio Declaration, and it means that if you want to go into business, you should be able to carry out the environmental impact assessment of that business, so that at least you know how far that your business will affect the environment. Then, if there are anything that you need to put into place to ensure that the environment is not adversely affected, you should be able to do that. And when you obtain this information by carrying out a sort, let me use a layman language now, carrying out a sort of feasibility study, it's when you start the business, you will continue to, you will mitigate your harms. You mitigate harm to the people who are going to be your customer. You also mitigate even harms to yourself and those who are working with you. So is the fact remain that when there's a proposed project that will affect the environment, you do this. So in a way, nobody is affected. The company is not, the business is not affected. Those who are going to be beneficiaries of that company is not, they are not as affected as well. And that's why. And if you look at the bottom line for this the Nigeria Environmental Impact Assessment Act, it was taken after the US National Environmental Policy Act of 1969. So, which of course has been making waves in that country, and I don't think the business people, they don't complain, because the act is cast in terms of is just to regulate the principles and procedure and method that will inform conditions for the assessment of any development, both public as well as private projects. So in that wise, all parties will be the winner for that. Thank you.
As a follow-up to that question, you mentioned something as all parties. Now, my next question would be, don't you think the involvement of all stakeholders in drafting up policies would go a long way in ensuring that we enforce and implement these policies? Because like they always say, if I'm one of the high chiefs that is involved in putting up the laws of the land, it definitely beckons on me that I should ensure that I obey the law of that land. Don't you think it's not just a case of the government going to sit down, bringing some group of experts together, drafting up the policies, and then coming out there to tell the citizens that you are meant to do this, you are meant to do that? Why don't we have like a round table of all stakeholders in drafting of policies and open that?
Okay, actually, there's nothing bad in that. And you see, what is that even most of these laws, they have there are local input, because no law that has come out of our legislative houses, they were actually promulgated by people that are representing interest. Yes, I agree with you that if it would be so much better if you can gather people, all the stakeholders, but sometimes such procedure may yield results, or it may not yield the results that will be beneficial to. But if you now want to ensure that okay, people now comply, because when you are part of maybe promulgation of law, you own it, and when you own it, yes, of course, you say, oh, this is mine, and of course, it will make for easy compliance, because you are part and parcel of those who actually put that law together and make it put it and make it or maybe you are part of people that formulated it and also make it to enact it in the law. So with that, people will be readily comply with it. But I still want to believe that sometimes if you want to go through that process in our own type of economy, it may it may be a little bit counterproductive because of you have to think of the numbers of the processes. Probably you have like it used to happen the whole day. You have a time meeting where you call people together to share their view. That when you graduate from that, probably you go to the government level. When you finish with that, you probably go to the state level before you get to the national level. So sometimes it may be a little bit cumbersome before you can arrive at the definite law. But the way out of that is that if you look at what we have on ground, of course, people can make amendments because no law is cast in iron. No law is iron cast that you cannot amend. You can always amend the law where you see probably lacuna or you see a loophole that affect people that will comply with that law. So that will be easy the easiest way out of. But what we are, for me, I used to say that most of the law that we have, as far as the environment is concerned in Nigeria, they are good law. They are good law. And the fact that we don't gather some people together to make it doesn't make it less to be law. Because as a matter of fact, most of these laws, they are actually from established principles, from established practice in other climes, which are working for them. So why is it not working for us here? So probably I will say the problem is with us, not with the law. Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. Okay, so Mr. John Dalko has joined us. Remember, I said he is an environmental lawyer and lecturer at the Ghanaian Institute of Management and Public Administration. Nice of you to join us, sir. Could you unmute?
Yes, I thank you for welcoming me, but I wanted to apologize first. I missed the Ghana time and the Nigerian time. It's now 10:20 in Ghana. When I was with 11, I think I messed it up. So please forgive me.
You want to start another war of Ghanaian issues and Nigerian issues? We are still on the jollof rice issue now.
No, but you know that debate has been settled.
No, it hasn't. But anyway, how do you think we could influence the effective implementation of environmental policies? That would be my first question.
I didn't get the question.
How do you think we could influence the effective implementation of environmental policies?
Well, it's one of the major challenges, of course, with the environmental law in Ghana implementation. And so one of the ways I have been advocating is the old age carrot and stick approach, where those who do well are rewarded and those who damage the environment are punished. Of course, I know there are people who don't believe in this carrot and stick approach and believe that we have to find a better way of resolving it. But I think that it still works because here in Ghana currently, one of the major issues that we are debating on leading to the presidential election is the issue of illegal mining, which is popularly called in Ghana as galamsey. And the illegal mining don't just happen, they happen in water bodies, all right? And so the current administration decided that, look, anybody who is found to have violated the law will be severely punished. And some people have been sent to jail for that by the current administration. Now, the opposition party, which was the government in power just about 4 years ago, the then president is also the candidate for the same party. On the campaign trail, is saying that he's going to grant amnesty to all those environmental polluters, all those illegal miners who are behind bars. And so now it has become a major campaign policy. When it goes to the mining towns and the mining villages, that is one of the points he's making, one of the campaign promises he's making. That is to release all those who have violated the environmental laws, that is, who were mining in water bodies, and have been punished, who are now in jail. So now you can see that it has become very political, and it is damaging. I was expecting that at this point, at least you could leave those who are in jail to suffer the punishment for violating serious environmental regulation. But here we are, a major political party which can win an election is promising these environmental violators that when you vote us into power, we are going to, as it were, give your freedom back to you. And so we are rewarding environmental polluters. So it's a major problem. I believe that if we apply, if this government retains power, obviously they're going to continue to punish environmental violators. And they've at least instituted some schemes for those who engage in environmental sound policies. And so if you are going to generate waste, if you're going to prepare the waste and then generate electricity out of it, you will get some tax credits and some tax reliefs. These are the other side of the carrot and stick approach. So those who want to treat the environment fairly are given some respite. So if you're a company, by way of tax relief, which is very good, but here you are, there are other people and an alternative government that is seeking to at least reward those who are violating the environment. And then again, those who will not will be punished. But after the carrot and stick approach, one of the ways that I believe environmental policy can be effectively implemented is when people who violate the environment feel the effect on their finances when environmental polluters are made to pay for environment. I mean, taking away the incarceration aspect, custodial sentences are outside. People must feel the effect of environmental pollution on their pocket. You see that when people are feeling things in their pocket, they begin to think twice, so that there's cost to environmental pollution. Of course, the age-old principle of polluter pays is being applied, but it's not being applied effectively. At least I know, I have followed the US environmental policies a bit, and I know how punitive, in terms of financial punishment, the US Environmental Pollution Agency can be. So people are asked to pay huge fines. Companies are asked to pay huge fines. And because it hits their bottom line, because it hits their pocket, companies are careful not to, as it were, violate these environmental regulations. So for starters, I think that these are the two main things. Carrot and stick, while you reward those who do well, punish by way of incarceration those who violate the environmental policies. And again, try as much as possible to get people to suffer the environmental harm from their pockets. When people's bottom lines, companies' bottom line, when people's pockets are being affected, they tend to think twice.
Thank you. So, Mr. Axel, how has your country, Sweden, been able to reduce their carbon emission while still promoting and developing the economy?
Okay. Well, can I please just comment on what John and Sunday said? Because they made really interesting points. Sure. And I mean, Sweden has been working with kind of improving our environmental impact assessments ever since the 80s, but it's still a problem that you face with environmental issues and carbon emissions or pollution and it's accountability. So it might be that you do an environmental impact assessment for, let's say, a new factory that is being built. Let's say in the context here, a sachet plastic production. And you do the environmental impact assessment based on their localities and how their factory is set up, how their filtration system, where the water that they use go out, the runoff, etc. But then you know, who takes accountability of the plastic that then ends up in the ocean or in the land and degrades the land? And like, see, environmental impact assessments are a great tool, but if there's no institutional kind of structure to, for example, deal with waste management or follow up and hold polluters accountable, like John mentioned, the carrots and sticks. That's what we've been doing in Sweden too. We subsidize, for example, renewable energy and try to help companies that through different climate funding acts to encourage a sustainable development on the industry side. But it's always that problem of who you hold accountable in the end. And yeah, I mean, it's very concerning to hear what John said, that you know, a political party can campaign on the fact that they will release environmental polluters, because that's also, everything is kind of interconnected. I mentioned the example of sachet water and drinking water. So one of the reasons sachet water is booming is because the lack of piped water, and one of the reasons piped water is lacking in Ghana is because of this mining issue that John mentioned. You know, so it's because the water, a lot of Ghana water companies' bodies have been polluted. So it's all kind of interconnected, and it's complex to design policies that both work on a local level, but then also holds polluters accountable. And sorry, to go back to how we've been curbing carbon emissions in Sweden. Like I mentioned,
developing economy.
Yes, so one of the major keystones of that was the carbon tax that was enforced, put into place in 1991. And you can kind of see a trend from there, how the GDP has continued to go up while emissions has gone down. But I mean, it's also important to note that Sweden is a modern economy that has been continuously continuing to modernize, and an economy that moves towards in large part a service economy. And like, we've been able to scale down on these large kind of environmental damaging industries that contributes to the pollution. And like I said, Sweden has we've seen a need to make it even stronger. So the climate act, the climate law that I will present later, that basically puts up an ambitious target of us being carbon neutral by 2045. And that is now meant to be this kind of guiding star for everything that the government does when they make their new budgets. If they don't take that into consideration, they're kind of breaking this new climate act. So it's about accountability and kind of pushing all sectors in one direction to minimize our carbon emissions. I'll tell you a little bit more about those targets later, but that's the main kind of recipe, I think. I mean, the European Union also has this, it's called ETS. It's a kind of carbon trading scheme. So you can kind of profit as a company by reducing your carbon emissions, or a certain type of industries are handed out X amount of like carbon credits that they're allowed to use. And it's beneficial for them to basically decrease their emissions, because then they can sell their carbon emissions. And all of the carbon emissions are supposed to go down by setting a total roof of these carbon credits. It's been working to some extent, but we can see that the change is not happening fast enough, and emissions are still rising. So yeah, it's the climate policy and international climate policy is something that's just going to be on top of all countries' agenda for the coming years, I think.
Right. Dr. Fabemi, some persons would say localizing environmental laws would help, and Wellington Madumira from Zimbabwe is keen in on that, where she says there is need to localize environmental laws considering indigenous knowledge system. Development and implementation of laws has to be inclusive. What do you have to say on this?
Well, thank you so much. I think that's a very beautiful idea. Like I said before, that when people are part of policy making, they actually tend to see it as their own. So when you localize it, I think it may yield results. But you see, I used to say one thing, that you cannot divorce people from their own environment. Because if you look at if I may give, for example, if you look at the provision of even national policy on the environment, which was actually made to, I was taken out of the interest for sustainable development of the environment. If you look at some of these principles there, it actually is inclusive enough. Well, if you look at the principles of these national policies, it is inclusive enough, because there is one of the principles they always say subsidiary principles, and the primary objective of that subsidiary principle is to ensure that environmental policy actually evolve right from the local people. You see, but in practice, in Nigeria, as an example, you discover that because some people have been fortunate enough to probably know one or two people, and they are the one that even the committee are looking up at. So when they get this opportunity to ensure that the policy are actually formulated to benefit the common people, what they do is just to sidetrack the community. Of course, they go and negotiate for funds from government, but when the funds are released, they don't remember that community again. And that has been the major problem that we have in Nigeria. And it is this same set of people who are actually ensuring that when policies are made, they are the one that first of all kick against it, because they won't allow the community to be part and parcel of the policy in the first instance. So that is by one side. And let me also make comment on what John said the other time, that yes, honestly speaking, it's very funny, but it's not funny because each country will have to find a way of developing a mechanism to ensure that people don't violate environmental policy. So, but using political campaign to launch that, that's the aspect I find a little bit funny, because if we agree that polluter must pay, yeah, there's nothing bad in polluter paying for whatever they are the pollution they have caused in the environment. But what of even our law enforcement agents? Because the agencies are there, and you find that most often than not, it is this law enforcement agency who are in charge of the environment that will collaborate even with some of the companies, so to sidetrack even whatever policy that are put in place and make it ineffective. So if the polluter will have to pay, or they have to, as rightly suggested, that probably they have to lose money as even go to jail, what is going to happen to the law enforcement agency, who are the collaborators? What are you going to do to them? Because it's not that people don't know them, people know them, but the problem is that probably some of them have got to a certain position that they become unquestionable. So that is the major issue. But like you said, I totally agree. If there's a way that you can make the policy to be inclusive and involve the local people, or even let it even involve from the local people, so they will be able to see it. And the government will still have to come in, that you don't allow all these maybe those who are using the name of the community to defeat the essence of the policy, to hijack the policy from them, or to hijack whatever benefit that will come from that. And we allow the local people to get involved truly. Because recently I was in a program where we are trying to look at we have to gather the NGOs, the CBOs, the community-based organizations, and so on and so forth, that they can have policies on even development, on local development. But you see, well, the truth is that right there are these offices, but you and I know that these offices It's only when there are seminars to see them, they send their representative and like that. But after the seminars and program like that, where is the where was the procedure from that seminars actually see the light of the day, because it will be hijacked somewhere by those who are in government. So that's the area we actually need to work towards to ensure that any policy make, number one, it is localized. Number two, people see it as their own, and let it be inclusive enough that people be able to own it up, and also ensure that they comply with such policy.
Okay, now talking about people not being able to be holding people accountable, what do you think can be done to hold persons accountable and then their acts are transparent enough for all, especially the government in this part of the world, and of the environmental soldiers, like you call them?
Thank you so much. You see, if it talks about the accountability, yes, of course, if we really believe in it, that when you are privileged, but I used to say it is privilege, nobody has a right to anything, but by privilege, you get to that certain position that you are the one that people will call up to come and do certain things. So, but you see, if they believe in the principle of accountability, you are representing an interest in your position of privilege. So, and if you now do something, you have to report back. You need to be transparent enough that people will see what you are doing. You need to be open enough that people will know, oh, yes, these people is carrying us along. And if they are not going to be accountable, the government is there. Because sometimes if you say the community people to actually hold them responsible, you see, it may look a little bit unconnected, but let me just give an example. Most of our representatives now, when they are looking for, maybe they are campaigning for positions, as the president of Ghana is now trying to do. When they are campaigning, they try to give us manifestos that will be so much attractive that we want to test them. Let them go and practice this. If this is a very good manifesto, this is a very good policy that they want to put in place. But after election, do you see any one of them again? So and how do you now hold them responsible? People don't talk to. When they are looking for votes, they know your house. After getting the votes, do they know your house again? Do they come back to you? So and if you say you must force them to be accountable, then you are fighting anarchy. You are fighting a sort of chaos in the community. So, but if there are laws that are put in place to ensure this accountability, it will be better for all of us.
Right. Mr. John, what do you think is the way forward for the kind of situation we are facing in Ghana right now, between political parties trying to make Ghana more votes with their varying sides on the environment at the expense of the owners of the environment, which is us all?
Well, for me, the fact that it is a campaign issue in this, I'm sure my colleagues will agree with me, is a good thing. That the environmental issues should become front and center in our political dispensation. So whilst one government is saying that, look, this menace is destroying our environment, and as Axel put it, they are so intertwined that, look, if you continue to engage in this illegal mining, the time is going to come. And I mean, we are even in that time. Your sources of fresh water, okay, is going to reduce drastically. So you're not going to have clean water from the taps, and you have to now spend extra money to buy the sachet water. The wrapper in itself is also another environmental issue altogether. So we have to let people understand. So on the campaign trail, the various political parties must clearly articulate their environmental policy. Why the ban on illegal mining is not only good for the people, but it's good for business, it's good for the environment, it's good for the people in the community. And we are talking about the people owning the policies. They need to come to the realization that when you destroy the water bodies. Indeed, it is the case. They are the immediate people who suffer because most of them depend on that source of water right there. They don't wait for the tap to be processed, the water to be processed before it's brought back through the tap. They go to the riverside to fetch these the water for their businesses. Now, if you destroy this, clearly, you're not going to be able to do that. You have to now wait and buy either sachet water or spend more money for some water tanker to bring the water to you. So that explanation will have to be made. And so for me, we can force the issue. My friend, Dr. Sunday, says that, well, to say that you're going to force them to be accountable is inviting anarchy. I tend to differ because, see, forcing them to be accountable doesn't necessarily mean that you have to go and put a gun on somebody's head. We know that we can punish people at the polls, okay? Because when you elect a political leader, you elect them for a particular term, for a particular purpose. So if there is a member of parliament in the area who is voting against a policy that will save the environment, you should vote against that particular MP because you know that he is not saving the environment. And so as environmental lawyers, we need to educate people, let them know that, look, you have to take the voting records of these your MPs, your leaders, and that's what we don't do in this country. We blindly follow political parties. So one is NPP, one is NDC, as we have in Ghana. So long as this person is in my party, it doesn't matter his voting record in parliament, I'll vote for him. We need to begin to educate people, let them understand that, look, you can punish people, you can force them to be accountable. Say, look, we are voting against you because when you went to parliament, you passed laws that raped our environment. Or we are voting for you because you passed a law, you voted for a law that protected the environment. And we can escalate that to the other level. I mean, in Ghana, the only elective positions are the parliamentarians and the president. But in Nigeria, where you elect governors, where you elect these state legislative officials, you can punish these state legislative officials because, look, in your particular district or in your particular area, you did not vote to protect the environment when the issue came to parliament, or you did not forcefully make a case to protect the environment, so I'm voting against you. We need to begin to shift from political party allegiance to issue-based politics. And that is one way we can force the politicians to do the right thing. Because, look, at the end of the day, somebody has to implement the law. We're talking about law enforcement officers who don't do the right thing. Yes, in Ghana, we've had those issues. Some law enforcement officers who are supposed to enforce the ban on illegal mining go in there. We've heard stories where they take monies from these illegal mining operators and even give them protection. Can you imagine the irony? You are supposed to stop me from doing this, but rather they take money, protect me to engage in the illegal activity. So the issues are so many, they are myriad, but they are so interconnected that we cannot take one or cannot disconnect one from the other. But we need to keep drumming the issue home that, look, in order for us to be able to get the environmental policies to be properly implemented, we need to hold our political leaders accountable. And of course, we need to also understand, we need to let the people understand the benefit of, sometimes I get exasperated because I don't think I'm the one who should come and tell you the benefit of the environment we live in. People should begin to know and own their environment. You live in an environment where illegal mining is taking place, where illegal logging is taking place. You live in a community where people are destroying your water bodies and you cannot say anything, you can't talk. We need to educate people, begin to speak out against these environmental violations. Hold the government, hold elected officials accountable. And not just that, companies that engage these things, we vote against them with our feet. Because of course the company is not going to stand for election. We can vote against them with our feet. We stop buying their product. We blacklist them. And in Ghana, the Environmental Protection Agency started a process like that where the companies that practice environmentally sound policies were given green, they were colored, so all the way to red. So environmental experts must begin to educate people. Let's label this product. If this product is labeled red, it means that it's not using sound environmental policies. Let's vote against them with our feet. And that is the only way we can force them to do the right thing. Ajida, you're on mute. You've been on mute.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Coming back to you, Dr. Fabemi, we have here in Nigeria, the Niger Delta to be precise, that the issue of glass flaring has led to the death of crops, polluting waters, damaging human health. Although the government has promised to tackle the problem, new data shows that flaring has indeed gone up. Which way do you think we could go forward in this respect? And how do you think we could hold the government accountable? It's a question from one of the attendees.
That's a very good question. And actually, the issue of flaring is not a new thing in Nigeria. And over the years, at least government have been trying to see how they can make use of that because it's like we are wasting resources. We are wasting what's supposed to be beneficial to all of us. Because I know there are few countries that even live on gas, but here in Nigeria, the gas of recent, I know the price of gas have gone up because I pay for it in my house and I know I know what I'm talking about. And meanwhile, we are wasting a lot of this. Is it like John actually said, I also subscribe to until we begin to hold our political office holders responsible and accountable for all these things. It is going to be those premier lip service to these things because we shouldn't be suffering for these things that we have because we have them in abundance. And if care is not taken, we may not going to have this thing forever because as time goes on, they may get extinct, and immediately that is done, that happens, that is the end of it. So now that we're supposed to be conserving what we have, we are wasting them. So, but if we can hold our political office holders, them accountable for all these things, probably that will give them a kind of the mind to ensure that they put in all the effort they could to ensure that these things are safeguarded. Because apart from the environmental impact that have on the people living in that environment, if you have been into that part of the country before, you will see even their plants, the way it looks like. The plant there, sometimes they are brownish in color as a result of effect of this gas and even the spillage from oil and some other things, which shouldn't be happening. So the only way we can do, the community people, and if what people have been talking about in Nigeria today, I think one major or maybe the major issues now people have been talking about is that there is need for us to restructure. If we restructure and all these things, if those who own that thing will be able to take care of it themselves. But in a situation of the kind of the country we are running now, this federating unit, where you have so much power in the center, and it appears that place is in a corner that the people in the center may not even be able to see what is happening there. If these things are ceded to the states to handle, probably there'll be a solution to them because the state that have that kind of resources will be able to use it to maintain the environment and make sure that they get a lot of revenue from that. So that is the easiest way. So that in our federating unit now that you have everything in center, everything in the center, and everybody, the state also runs to the center to get part of the cake. what actually belongs to them, because they are from their soil. These things are coming from. So if these are ceded to the state to handle and to manage, of course, it will be a lot of resources going to the state. And some of the state can even assist without even going to the center for any allocation. Thank you. Unmute yourself, Adisa.
Sorry about that again. So, Axel, Mr. John Davko mentioned the issue of the citizens being aware of the power they hold to be able to hold their elected officers accountable to the laws and policies of the land. But one may wonder, especially in this part of the world, unfortunately, so that a lot, would we say citizens are not really aware of the power of the environment to them? Or would we say they are aware, but there are other things that they hold more dear to them, in as much as they don't even see the issue of environmental challenges being a problem? So most people would say they want to be able to just put food on their table. They want to be able to just do this and do that. The issue of environmental challenges is like very trivial to most persons over here. What do you make of that, and what's the way forward?
Yeah, thank you so much for that. Because you see, let me ask, if I want to answer your question factually, I will say yes, the numbers for the awareness is not actually impressive. The people that are aware of this AFOC that's being done to environment, they are not as many as we are supposed to know. So that in a way is actually affecting how people are reacting to environmental challenges. And that's the reason why there's need for education. There's need for awareness programs in localities at the community levels to make sure that people actually wake up. Look at the incident of 1988 in Nigeria. You know, it was when there was this toxic dump that was dumped at Cocoa area in the Niger Delta region. You know, if not because people were dying, people wouldn't have known anything. But it was when people now discover that, oh, there's something happening now. There's a kind of ailment which are not, it is not part of what they used to experience before. That's the time they begin to wake up and they now discover, oh, something that maybe some people have brought something and they have dumped it in their backyard and it's affecting them negatively. So I will say there's need for those who knows, even at the community level, to educate those who didn't know. Because what people are battling with now is, oh, how do I live? How do I take my 3 square meal per day? And the data is taking, even that's why in the process of that, they are even adding to environmental pollution in the course of that. So we actually need awareness programs as well as education to ensure that everybody key into environmental issues. That is the time we can win the war. Otherwise, we still continue like this. And those who are in political offices, the elected officers, who are supposed to help us, by the time they get to the offices, it's important that they remove themselves from us. So that's the major problem. They remove them, and then when next time they will now want to go back to office, that they remember us and they come back to us. And when they now probably share little monies, people, because of the poverty in the land, they just take that, thinking that, not knowing that they are even selling their future away.
Okay. So, Mr. Axel, we have this very huge goal that we want to achieve as regards environmental sustainability and climate change. And we have less than 10 years to achieve that. Do you think it's still a possibility that we would achieve this dream of ours?
Well, I don't want to be a Debbie Downer to anyone. It's going to be a big challenge. I hope so. But yeah, I mean, as we've mentioned, wait, did you refer to the Nigerian target or global or?
2020 is a target for everyone. 2030 rather, sustainable goals of 2030
exactly,
is a target, yeah. And
yes, exactly.
partner
So,
to it.
I mean, right now the indicators are and the targets, it's looking quite dark to actually reach those goals. And I think in terms of the Sustainable Development Goals, we have a Swedish scientist, Johan Rockström, who tries to put them in a hierarchy, because if you don't have, for example, water, clean air, and like there are these goals that should probably take precedence over the others because they impact the others so much. For example, economic development will be so hampered by climate change and climate change impacts that it's pertinent to look at adaptation and mitigation if we're going to have a chance to reach those goals. And I think back to your previous question on the ability for local people to, I mean, sure, awareness works to some extent, but at the end of the day, I mean, we see it even in countries like Sweden, it's very difficult for the individual to just take accountability and change their lifestyles, because in one way or another, we're kind of locked in our own circumstances. And you know, in Sweden, you might be able to put more effort into trying to live sustainably because you can afford it. And like you said, you know, maybe you can feel safe that you'll have water and food on the table for your family. But it's totally understandable that environmental issues don't take priority for people when they have these pressing issues or their life is threatened. Or so again, that's where I think it's really important. And like Dr. Sande just mentioned, well, I mean, the issue of the political cycles is a problem. Like you know, elected officials do 4 years, and then that way the incentives to actually make strong policies that continue from one elected government to the next. And that's why we made this kind of climate act or new climate policy framework in Sweden, because a big part of that is we have a new climate act that basically tells the government that all their budget proposals and all their big policies, they need to have the climate goals in mind. And if like they're not supposed to do anything that will increase emissions, basically. And then another is our targets. So by 2045, we want to be carbon neutral, for example. And then the third that I wanted to emphasize is that, so the Swedish government, we've set up an independent kind of expert group called the Swedish Climate Council. And so the government every 4 years, they have to make a climate action plan. And then this expert group of scientists and experts in different fields. And it's also important to, in such an expert group, to bring in experts from social sciences and economics and climate, because like we mentioned before, it's all interconnected and needs to be interdisciplinarily approached. But this Climate Council, they release a report every year that kind of informs the public and the politicians if they are actually meeting these targets. And I mean, unfortunately, right now, the 2020 report is saying that the policies that the Swedish government is doing now is not enough to meet our targets, our goals. And you know, that also becomes then a strong indicator of what we need to change and which sectors we need to change in, but also helps environmental lawyers, NGOs, and the public to hold the government more accountable. So I know that for a fact, NGOs such as Greenpeace, they refer to this new climate act a lot. Like, you've promised this, now you have to live by it. So you can't allow a new, very polluting industry to commence, basically. So and I mean, and it all comes down to kind of accountability and transparency, so that the government actually allow themselves to be scrutinized. Because it's one thing to say we've made these strong policies, it's another one to actually get proof that they work. And yeah, so that's something that has been, I mean, successful in the way that the public now gets more awareness of how well the government meets these targets. but also puts more pressure on the government. Yeah.
All right.
But
So,
I'm hopeful that we can meet the 2030 agenda, of course, but it's gonna take a lot of more work from all nations involved.
definitely. So while I would ask Mr. John Dauke a question, I would please implore you to get ready to present the Climate Act you talked about. We'd love to see more of it.
Okay.
So,
you want to...
not now, like after Mr. John Dauke is done with his response.
Okay.
Mr. John, we know we already have environmental policies in Ghana. Which ones would you give the thumbs up for, and which ones do you think needs to be probably looked at and redrafted? And the ones you would give the thumbs up for, do you think they are laws that or policies that you would want to be adopted in other areas of the world?
Well, so the laws we have on the environment in Ghana are not many, I must say, but we are signatories to many international environmental policies, international environmental laws, and international environmental action plans. And so most of the policies that apply, most of the laws that apply in around the globe also apply to the Ghanaian environment. And so we've been signatories to the Kyoto Protocol, the various protocols that we have entered into as a country. And so for me, what we have in Ghana as one Environmental Protection Agency Act is the act that regulates is a local act that regulates the various institutions. And so quite apart from the international environmental laws, which we adapt, we have this local act, which and then its regulations, which help us by and large with the environmental protection. For me, I really don't think that we need more laws because the international environmental laws we have adapted, okay, they are enough. If we are to enforce our laws as they are now, we will have a better environment than we have now. And so the world signed the Paris Agreement. Ghana and many African countries represented, very well in Paris in 2015, signatories to the Paris Agreement. Of course, our responsibilities are different. The developed countries' responsibilities are different from that of the African countries. And so we have been part of the global fight against, environmental pollution. The problems we have, I would say, is not the lack of policies. And so I cannot say that, well, these are the policies that I like, these are the ones I don't like, so we should take them out. No. What we need in this country, and I guess in many other African countries, is the willpower to enforce the laws. I mean, how come you have a law against pollution in this country, but pollution is going on day in and day out in the country without being, without the perpetrators being punished? You cannot create another law. We cannot pass another law against pollution. Again, because there's a law against pollution. But there's always pollution going on in this country, and I guess in many other countries. We have ban on fishing, closed seasons. People don't regard them. So at the sea, we're supposed to have closed seasons. In the bush, we're supposed to have closed seasons where hunting will not take place. where fishing will not take place. But nobody respects these regulations, unless in Ghana, for instance, you put some religious connotations to the law. So, for instance, don't go to the bush this week or this month because the gods don't like it. Yeah, then people are afraid. But to say that don't go to the bush, don't go hunting, because our laws are against it, and that if you are caught, you'll be punished. People doubt the consequence. It's sad. It's a very sad commentary to pass, but it is what it is. The law enforcement agency whose responsibility it is to enforce this is taking money and allow perpetrators to go scot-free. We have enough environmental policies from the early 1900s. I can tell you some of the laws we have in Ghana are 1927 laws, forest protection laws, forest ordinance, that the should I use the colonizers? Maybe the colonizers left us. Some of them are as valid as today. We have them compiled. We've passed new ones. We've passed Timber Plantation Act. We've passed Timber Protection Act. We've passed all the mining regulations. We've passed the Environmental Protection Act. We are signatories to all the protocols. We joined the world to sign the Paris Agreement. So we have enough laws. It is the enforcement that is lacking. But you see, there are the other side to the enforcement, that maybe I need to bring to the attention of my co-panelists. If you want to enforce a law, sometimes in this part of the world, you need to give people alternatives. So you are telling us that, well, felling trees, okay, for firewood, for instance, it's not good. Because we fell trees, we use them for charcoal, we are destroying the environment. Okay, so what is the alternative? Are you able to give the people alternatives they cannot resist? Because mind you, and maybe just to make a point that I'm sure I'll tease Azal's mind you, the environmental pollution we have today, the climate change we have today, did not start today. It started as a result of the constant pollution of the environment from the Industrial Revolution, which we did not take part. Europeans and the Americans poured and continue to pour fumes into the atmosphere, carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. This is what is attracting the heat, causing sea level rise. We did not take part. Now, so when you tell us, oh, don't fell trees because when you do that, you are destroying the environment, have you given us the alternative? And so the developed countries, and I think that this has come to be accepted, the developed countries owe more responsibility because they have benefited from the environment more than the developing countries like Ghana and Nigeria. And so they have a bigger role to play. So if you want me to stop, in Ghana, for instance, the illegal mining, yes, I know it's very bad, it's destroying the environment. What is the alternative? People live in these villages, they don't have food to eat. And they see that big mining will come, the Anglo Gold Ashantis, the Newmonts of the world will come, the big Canadian and Australian mining companies will come. They will extract the resources and go. Whilst they sit there and suffer, they are hungry, there are no jobs. If they can, they believe that they need to survive. Yes, you want to explain it all you can to them, the need for them to save the environment. The person is thinking about survival today, you are thinking about the future, he doesn't even know whether he'll be part. He might die tomorrow. Or because of poverty, he might not even be able to marry and give birth so that he will be thinking about his family in the future. These are real issues. Somebody is thinking of how to survive now. And so we need to look at the alternative. Are there alternative livelihood programs for these people who you are asking to stop polluting the environment? So you can prescribe their actions all you want. Declare their actions illegal. Say that if you mine here, if you fell tree, if you do this, if you do that, it's legal. We have enough of that. We have enough punishment. for that. But people will still risk it because they believe that if they don't do that, they are going to die anyway. So, I mean, what is the big deal? So our European and American brothers, they have a responsibility to also chip in to ensure that, look, these targets are met. Now, I mean, if you make a case, yeah, for instance, that you need to cut down emissions, use clean energy. Clean energy, yes, as environmentalists, we've always made a point that clean energy can be cheaper. But the cheaper sources of energy, the Chinese are using them such that their goods as compared to other nations are cheaper. Because they get cheap source of energy, their goods are cheaper than goods that will come from Europe and America because their source of energy might be more expensive. When the goods come to the market, I'm thinking about my pocket. The same phone, if it's made in China, it's $300. If it's made in America or Europe, it's $1,000. What's the purpose of phone? Make a call. So rather, I'll go for the $300 phone, and the European and American businesses will be suffering. So they'll be crying because China is cheating them. The Chinese are not using clean energy. They'll be saying all this, but they're also thinking about their survival. It's a myriad of problems. And so to come back and answer the question again, for me, I don't believe that as it stands now, there are bad laws that need to be corrected, or we need to have more laws. We have enough on our books. We are signatories, and like many African countries, signatories to all the international conventions and policies and regulations. What we need is enforcement. How do we enforce it when the people are thinking of their survival? You create alternative livelihood for them. These are issues that I think that we will have to begin to look at and see how best we can help the environment. I hope I managed to answer your question.
Yes, you did. So Axel, are you ready to present the Swedish Climate Act now of 2017?
Sure. Let me
All
try.
right, so we'll take a minute.
Maybe I'm sure Axel will be able to respond whilst he's loading the thing, respond to some of the issues.
And I thank you for also bringing up the fact, I mean, nobody can deny the history of climate change and emissions, and that the Western world is, you know, the main cause for this problem, and the industrial revolution, like you pointed out, and you know, it's debated back and forth how this kind of climate debt is supposed to be repaid. But one of the international ways that I'm sure you're aware of is the Green Climate Fund. And I'm at least proud to say that Sweden is the largest donor to the Green Climate Fund per capita. We unfortunately saw that the largest donor for a country, the US, they cut a lot of their funds under the Trump administration, but hopefully we'll see an increase in that, because the Green Climate Fund really tries to help channeling finance to these developmental projects that can, like you said, just putting new laws and prohibiting things is probably not the solution, especially in the developing world where you need development. And the Green Climate Fund can hopefully, on a project basis, help in that transition. But yeah, it's a long debate, and a moral debate, an ethical debate that I think needs to be continually discussed, and of course the responsibilities of the Western world to the global South in this regard. So, and I thank you for bringing up the issue of kind of the global political economy and the global market. And you know, it's the same in Sweden. People will buy the cheap phone. Of course, the general public will go for what's cheaper for them usually. And it's I mean, it's difficult to to put, like, where do we put blame? And I mean, one problem that like, where does, for example, all the electronic waste go? Like we talk about, there's always an output. We live on a finite planet, and you can't produce a phone in China, use it in Sweden, and then think it just will disappear. All these electronics end up somewhere, and there's a responsibility in that too. Like, we can't just dump things or sell the you know, the electronic waste to African countries, because they don't have the infrastructure to actually sort it in an environmentally friendly way. And then you have children sorting electronic waste. It's
and that is happening in Ghana. I feel that Ghana is the capital of that, of the dumping.
Yep, I know, it's horrible.
Yeah.
Okay, well, so let me just try to share my screen.
Okay.
Okay, is it working?
Yes, it is. Please, I would urge your attendees to look at this critically. Questions might come up from there, and then we might all learn a thing or two to take home from there.
I mean, it's a brief introduction and just a brief, I just wanted to run through the kind of Swedish latest agenda. So as I mentioned before,
okay.
Wait a second. As I mentioned before, this is our very ambitious target of having net greenhouse gas emissions by 2045. I mean, we'll discuss that. It sounds ambitious, and it might be hopefully achievable, but there are some caveats to that. And but anyway, in 2017, we adopted a new climate policy framework, and it's 3 pillars. It's the Climate Act, the targets, and then this interdisciplinary climate policy council. And on the picture here, you see Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Environment that signs it. So the purpose was to make a more clear and coherent climate policy that can send signals to the market and other actors and countries that Sweden is trying to set an ambitious goal to reach the Paris Agreement. And then most importantly, it creates a platform that forces the Swedish government to follow up on their obligations to the Paris Agreement. And it doesn't matter if the next elected parliament, like they have to continue this work, and they can't just scrap it. So it's kind of a roadmap to reach our goals in the Paris Agreement and increase transparency and accountability. And it was voted for with broad majority, except from a far right political party. So just briefly, the Climate Act it kind of stipulates that the government's climate policy must be based on climate goals and how their work is carried out. When they produce their yearly budget bill, they also need to provide a climate report. And every 4th year, they need to give an action plan that describes on how their budget bill and their climate report and the policies work together. And then we have these targets of net greenhouse gas emissions by 2045. And after that, we want to have negative emissions, which would entail various kind of carbon sinks, carbon capture and storage implementations in the industry sector. And then also another important target to talk about is, so we want to have an emission per person that's less than 1 ton by 2045. And I think this kind of relates back to what John said, because right now Swedes have a carbon emission per capita of 5.5 ton, you know, whereas here in Nigeria, it's just a fraction of that. So, and that's something that is kind of being developed in the scientific community, how we can also measure emissions in a good way, because being net greenhouse gas, achieve 0 net greenhouse gas emissions by 2045, that's our national emissions, not taking into consideration all the actual products that we import. So basically those emissions are happening somewhere else. And then this Climate Policy Council that is the expert body in charge of making sure that the policies are in line with target, and they give us the yearly progress report. And just quickly, like, policies are great, but are they actually working? Yes, the public engagement has been rising in Sweden. I'm sure many of you have seen, for example, the youth coming together under Greta Thunberg's Friday for Future, which gained a lot of traction globally. And she, for example, is one of those people that continue to refer to this new climate policy. Like, you have an obligation. You have an obligation to the Paris Agreement. You've signed this climate act. You know, put it into action. We've seen other EU member states set up similar ambitious climate neutral targets, and activities have increased across the board in civil society, municipalities, and the business sectors. But the reductions of the carbon emissions have slowed down. We saw the biggest reductions from 1990s to 2003 and 2014, which is fact of that carbon tax mostly. But now it's kind of slowed down, and they're really trying to think of ways to improve this policy and enforce it in a way that actually leads to bigger cuts in emissions, because otherwise we won't meet the target. And one of the things that this expert council pointed out was that the government's policies now, they're lacking impact assessments and tables for implementation. Again, as John mentioned, implementation and enforcement, that's usually what lags behind. And unfortunately, with climate change and carbon emissions, we don't really have that time anymore. So, you know, it's we can't keep pushing it, postponing it. So just some quick lessons learned from the Swedish experience is that leadership and governance, and also emphasize that you get collaboration all through society. Otherwise, you won't achieve these climate goals. And one example would be, for example, nature conservation as part of dealing with climate change. You really need to attack it from a more participatory approach, we believe, where you involve the local communities, the indigenous communities, use their knowledge and make them feel like stewards of the environment and design protected areas. Otherwise, you know, enforcement of areas where you just say this land is now going to be set off for the environmental good and nobody's allowed to cut down trees, you will have illegal logging anyway, and people will not, it's very, very hard to monitor and enforce, basically. We need a timetable to figure out how we're going to change our vehicle fleet and the transportation to make it more towards electrical vehicles, for example, and look at agriculture, but that's also a sector that is still lacking in Sweden. And like I said, one of the lessons learned that if we're going to meet our ambitious goals and targets, we need to think about how we can also extract carbon from the atmosphere, pump it down. And one of the ways is bioenergy carbon capture storage, where you take biomass and then in the end of the factory line, you basically mix the CO2 and turn it into liquid, and then you need to pump it down. And this is something that scientists are saying to reach the Paris agreements and the goals that's like set up for 2050, for example. It's a necessity to implement these kind of new innovations. And also how we treat the forest sector in Sweden as a carbon sink, but also then use the biomass and improve biodiversity. Yeah, thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions. I mean, we've touched upon this back and forth throughout the whole discussion, but I just wanted to share this is the latest kind of call. I mean, we also have, like many of you mentioned, or other countries have, we have kind of these environmental laws in place, but what we saw was that they weren't enough, and that something was needed to kind of strengthen enforcement and accountability.
Sure, as the questions come in, I would pose them to you. Dr. Fabemi, looking at this...
hello, Jimo.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I wanted to ask Azel a quick question.
Yes.
How does the 2045 date sit with the Paris agreement? I thought the Paris was earlier when it was signed in 2015. It was somewhere 2030, but the US is 2045. So how
Yes.
does your timeline fit in with the Paris?
Yes, sorry. So I didn't mention that, but we have like different steps. So we have 2020, 2030, and then but the being carbon neutral or zero carbon emissions or like plus minus, that's our national target for 2045. But we have targets leading up to that that is in line with the Paris Agreement targets, basically. I should have clarified that.
Thank you. So this was passed in 2015. Are you able to tell us what has happened in the last 5 years that gives you hope that you can meet the 2025 and the 2030 target from Sweden?
Well, I mean, like I said, unfortunately, we've seen a trend of the, I mean, we're still reducing our emissions, but there's a trend of it not happening fast enough. But what gives us hope and what gives us hope, me hope personally, is how climate change have really surfaced to become something that not only expert groups are talking about in closed quarters, but now, you know, the children, the youth, the population is really trying to push political leaders to act on it as well. Because at the end of the day, I mean, you know, you have scientists that argue that the Paris Agreement is great, but it's not strong enough. And that comes again down to what you mentioned, the enforcement of it, and like, are countries actually punished or sanctioned somehow if they don't meet their targets, or, you know, well, it was quite devastating to see just how easy it was for the Trump administration to just leave the Paris Agreement, basically. So that sent a worrying signal, I think, to the climate community that you know, the robustness is questionable. But in Sweden, I locally, yes, I would say the main thing would be public awareness, and also you're seeing more and more in tandem with that, how industries and all businesses, I mean, some could be accused of trying to greenwash their products because it's so trendy to be sustainable. But some are also really trying to create a product that has a life cycle that is much more sustainable than just produce, use, and throw away, basically. So that's a positive trend. Yeah, I hope that answered your question. Thank you.
So, Madam Moderator, I think we are waiting for you.
Sorry, I got locked out for a moment. I had to connect back with one of the panelists to let them know the network. So, Dr. Fabemi, I was about asking that, looking at the act put up by Sweden, what do you make of it?
Well, I listened to our friend as that. I think the act is very good, but I like where he also concluded that the issue of enforcement, and normally when we say policy, you see, even by the definition, policy is just a statement, maybe what we can call the statement of intent or commitment. And that's why we cannot graduate policy to law, because policy is just like maybe an action plan, which of course, until it becomes law, when we talk of the implementation, we are just kidding ourselves. And it means that if government now fail to comply with it or to actually follow through, there's nothing you can do. But in paper, I would say that it's a very good policy, which I only pray that the Swedish government will be able to carry on and actually follow to letter to see that the policy was actually implemented by that government. That's what I can say about that.
All right. So,
can I just add quickly to that? Because
sure, please go
maybe
on.
because it becomes maybe a bit juggled around, like it's called policy framework, but one of the main things that it was actually a bill, like a law, a climate act. So it's now passed as a bill, and so it's not just a policy anymore, and that was the kind of uniqueness of it. But then, of course, you could argue that the climate act or this new law is very flexible, and you could interpret it in many ways. But the main thing is that the government now should not basically put budgets forward or allow things that increases Sweden's emissions. Then they are breaking this bill. So that was, yeah.
Dr. Famemi.
Yeah, I'm with you.
All right, so you also said you have some couple of papers, but I would like to ask, what do you think is the most easiest and sustainable policy we could draft for persons across the world right now?
Okay. Yeah, you are talking of Nigeria.
Let's start from home. Charity, they say, begins from home.
In Nigeria, we have a national policy on environment, and it was launched as far back as 1989. But later it was enlarged in 1999. And if you look at the objective of the policy is actually to ensure sustainable development of the environment. And that is why when the policy was put together, it was the target is to achieve balanced cross-sectorial linkage to accommodate the environmental concern of all sectors of the Nigerian economy. So, and we have the principles. Of course, the principles there was the already known principles of sustainable development, which they are very good. But apart from that, there are goals. The policy goal is that number one is that it is the intention of government that the policies should be able to secure a quality of environment adequate for good health and well-being. And within that goal as well, we also have to raise public awareness and promote understanding of the essential linkage between the environment, resource, and development, as well as to encourage individual and community to participate in environmental improvement efforts. And you see that if you can look from that second goal is that the target is that to have the human population to get involved in policies on the environment, which of course I will say that's the area we are actually failing in this country. And that's why I said at that time when you are talking of the principle of this inclusiveness, that until when you are able to raise awareness enough among people because of, of course, the ignorant now among the populace, you may not be able to go much because you have to promote the understanding what are the essential linkage between the environment and even the resources and development. So it is when they are able to buy into it that it now begin to make headway as far as the issue of the environment is concerned. So, and of course, in Nigeria today, we know that our population is another big problem because it's like we are reproducing, and the policy on the population are not being followed to letter because there are a lot of loopholes in that policy on population that actually give room for men to come to have wives and wives. And that's why, sorry to say this, to make a reference to this, that's why someone can come to the house to boast that, oh, I have 4 wives at home, and they brought them to the House of Representatives and boasting about it, So, and if you continue to have increase in human population, there is no how the environment, natural resources will not be affected, because people must live, they are going to live within the environment. So, and it will cause a lot of things. So it will rub on climate change, it will rub a lot of other aspects of the economy. So that's the bottom line.
All right, you just mentioned that drafting of policies is not the major issue now. The issue has to do with implementation and enforcement.
Yeah, exactly.
We know we've mentioned this is not the first time we are making a statement as regards implementation and enforcement of policies at the start of this series. But what do you think, what's the easiest way for you towards implementation and enforcement of policies?
Well, thank you. Yes, when we talk of the easiest way for us, for a country,
and sustainable, the easiest and sustainable.
Yeah, the easiest way that the environment could be sustained is, well, number one is to put law in place, which of course, like I just said the other time, in Africa, basically, is not, the problem is not having law. We have enough law. But the problem is that these laws, are they being enforced? And to ensure that the enforcement of laws, we also have agencies that are put in place. But you see, because of political problem, because of quality bottleneck, you see that those who are supposed to be in charge of the enforcement of the law, they don't do it properly. So, and I wouldn't know that it's only when the community, if we are all alert to our responsibility, if we all wake up to our responsibility to ensure that those who are in charge of the enforcement, they actually do the work the way it's supposed to be done, not compromising. Because you see, it's very easy in Nigeria for agency to look other way when the environment is even being violated by companies, by big peoples, and so on and so forth. Take for instance, where you don't supposed to have structures, you have them in this country. And some citizens will be happy when you see the red mark on a wall. Oh, stop construction. But you'll be thinking that, okay, probably they are going to put it through. But you see that before you know what is happening, they have put up the structure there. Look at the way people are reflecting even a filling station in Nigeria, even within the residential areas, and so on and so forth. Where it's supposed to have industrial estate, you now find people living within the industrial estates. And you now begin to wonder, do we even have agency in place? Meanwhile, we have town planners, we have what do you call it? We have even the environmental protection agencies here and there who will be looking the other way around, probably because what people have termed a Nigeria factor. And that's why most of these things are not working. So I will also support people that have spoken that it is not that our problem is not lack of law, but lack of implementation. And the only way now is for the community to rise up to the occasion. But we need to educate them. We need to educate them. We need to inform them that, okay, these people they are toiling with your future. You have to stand up to fight for yourself. Please unmute yourself.
Mr. John, thank you, Dr. Fabemi. Mr. John, you mentioned earlier that if we don't have alternatives for the local man as regards felling down trees and probably securing another means of energy, this problem might not be solved. So an attendee asked this question now: how do you think we could link environmental management and livelihoods of rural communities? You're on mute.
Yes, thank you. Environmental management and livelihood of the rural community. There's really no way out of it, I must say, because I have seen it. I have experienced it by way of research. I've gone to communities in Ghana where communities that hitherto had to go to the farms without having to carry their own sachet water to the farms. And when they go to the farms, they could just drink from the streams because the streams were really, really clean. To the situation where now farmers will have to go to the same place. They now carry their sachet water with them, because when they go to the farm, they need to drink water. Now they can no longer depend on the streams that just about, should I say 20 years ago, or even less, maybe 15 years ago, they could easily rely on. Now, these people are faced with a stark choice. Do we keep this water body clean so that, for instance, we can only depend on farming? Or the youth in the city are young men and women who have to go down into this river to mine for gold, to make money for themselves. So when you look at it, there is no easy answer to this question. But as a country, we have a responsibility to save these people, and that is a difficult responsibility coming from not just the countries but regional bodies and international governmental organizations. Yeah. Because really, when you are torn between keeping a safe environment and feeding yourself, I mean, if I ask any panelist here to choose one, or even the person who asked the question to choose one, which one would you choose? Food on the table, the environment. As of which one would you choose? Really, you tell me and I'll go to you.
Livelihood, food.
You understand? I wanted my friend Green to answer that, but I'm sure he will answer.
Yes, no, I totally agree. Yes, I mean, I have a family as well.
So that is a difficulty that we all have. Except that, of course, in some cases, it is not mutually exclusive. And I acknowledge that as well. We cannot say that good livelihood and good environmental management are mutually exclusive. In fact, they can be mutually inclusive. You can practice sound environmental practices and good livelihood. And this must also be explained to people, because really, talking about felling of trees, for instance, if you have the trees, if you have good water bodies, it helps you. It helps the environment. Good environmental practices themselves. Okay, even you'll be able to get good yield if you are planting food. Okay, so it is a balance. It is a balance that everybody must help strike. But I think that the responsibility is more on the side of the government than the individual. Because the government is coming from the top with policies, with interventions to let the people understand. And sometimes it is not just the individuals, those who are engaging in, let's say, subsistence farming, who need this advice. It is the big corporation. Okay? So you have these huge mining companies in Ghana, huge timber companies in Ghana, who are felling trees, who are out there destroying the environment to extract these resources. Ghana, we don't really cry much about pollution because we don't have big industries here that pollute. And so that is really not of a concern. Our concern is the mining degradation, the degradation of the environment through mining activities and deforestation as a result of the exportation of timber. So these are the real issues. We can balance it. We need the government to be part, but on the individual low level, of course, we need to understand that when people have to choose between food and saving the environment, obviously they will choose food. but of course, that point also have to be made clear that really when you save the environment, you can get even better yield for survival. So I believe that government has a big responsibility, and just to make this point again, so I guess I hope I don't sound repetitive or as breaking the record. We need to find alternative livelihood, for the people, so that if there is an option to save the environment and still have food on the table, obviously, a reasonable person will want to choose saving the environment and having livelihood. But if we don't have that choice, and it's just between having livelihood and good environmental management, look, any reasonable person will want to survive. If you don't survive, how do you even think about the environment?
All right, thank you. Now, I know that the title of this webinar series is When the Environment Fights Back, Creating a Defense from a Legal Perspective. But unfortunately, the environment is already fighting back. So Axel, I would ask, what do you think, where can we create that balance between environmental management and development at all forms?
Well, it's a big question to answer, a difficult one, of course. And I mean, touching upon what John mentioned, I think it's also because, like he said, if you have a stool and one person has a stool and you tell them we're taking off this and this leg, you need to replace it with another one. Otherwise, one part of the problem is that, as I've understood it, is that a lot of countries like Ghana, Nigeria, and other African countries have become kind of net importers of products. Instead of producing toothpicks, it's imported, and as that continues to grow, the room for people to find alternative livelihoods shrinks. So I think that's one way for the government to try and empower local production, national production, look at what is flooding their market from abroad, and and what consequence does that have in the long term. I think that is a very important aspect to consider when talking about how, because otherwise the effect now, and I've also done some research in Ghana before on actual sachet water. It's a coincidence, but and water and drinking water supply, and also that links back to job opportunities in the rural areas, and they are rapidly decreasing. So people have to travel to Accra to look for jobs, and but then housing prices are rising there, so they have to move back to the peripheral urban areas or rural areas. But that commute will be a struggle, and it's the room for local production, alternative economies, more spread out than just in the urban centers, I think is a key developmental aspect to look at, because all over the world, urbanization is happening at a extremely fast rate, and that also has implications to well, first of all, people's connection to nature, people's knowledge about their local nature, and also how to actually work with it to make beneficial small-scale businesses, because otherwise it's so easy to get stuck in, if you move to an urban city and then you don't have an option but to sell these small products that are imported, toothpicks and single-use coffee and whatever it might be, rather than looking at what can be produced locally or within the country. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I just wanted to also add that, I mean, looking at our topic, I'm interested in when the environment fight back. And we have seen that, of course, maybe we have all intentionally decided not to mention COVID. But of course, we know that it's as a result of environmental degradation. And we've had a lot of research that points clearly to the fact that we had this COVID because of the fact that the virus, we are killing their hosts. Their hosts are the animals that live in these bush, and we are killing them. And so the virus don't have anywhere to stay but to move to humans. And the consequence of that is what the world is facing, spending billions and billions and billions of cedis. The good thing, though, is as a result of that, one of the places that is dependent on these species, endangered species. China is now banning importation of these endangered species, and so the demand is going down. And so you can see that, yes, the environment has fought back, and as a result of that, there's ban on the importation of endangered species in China. So it has reduced the demand for the export. And so at least the environment has fought back in a good way. The world is now listening. We know that if we don't protect the environment will fight back and it will affect us. And then we can all see it has affected the economy of the world. And the statistics are there to prove. In one conference I attended, I made a point that at least one good thing about COVID is that it has helped us reduce the population of the world, because overpopulation is also an environmental issue, right? People don't want to accept that. But I thought that, well, whether you like it or not, we have millions of people who are there, who otherwise will still be competing with us for the scarce resources. So it can't go with a lot of people didn't like it, but I still maintain that, yeah, it is what it is. The environment is fighting back to protect itself. If we are not careful, maybe the next wave of, and we need to let people understand, if you don't protect the environment and it fights back, maybe the next wave, we may not be able to save the world. And really, this is getting me to understand that maybe the hell we have been told to believe, that there's a hell afterwards when we die, or there's going to be some brimstone and fire. We will set it up ourselves. We will destroy the world ourselves because of lack of environmental protection. Maybe the next wave might just wipe all of us from the face of the earth. Looking at what has happened right now, a lot of people who did not die directly as a result of COVID have died because they probably didn't get a doctor to take care of them because of another disease. So maybe you had a heart attack or you needed some urgent medical attention, but because of the COVID, all the attention is now on COVID. So you die as a result of that. Somebody who needed money to go to the hospital because of COVID, his company has laid him off. He doesn't have money to go to the hospital for maybe a simple headache. The person may have died as a result of that. This is not directly as a result of COVID, but you can say that they are linked in a way. So when the environment fights back, it's dangerous, and we cannot, maybe the next one may not be able to slow it down like we are trying to do now. And in any case, to even find the vaccine that we are looking at is still in the environment. You cannot, the vaccine is taken out of something that is in the environment. If you don't have all these trees, why do you, because we get medicine from trees, right? So you are felling all the trees. How do you even get medicine done? And so we really need to educate our people, let them understand the importance of the environment we are playing, because when it begins to fight back, well, oh boy, we might not be able to stand that next time.
All right, thank you very much. So back to you, Dr. Fabemi. Time is unfortunately not our friend. I would like to know your last words on this topic, when the environment fights back, creating a difference from a legal perspective?
Thank you very much. Well, like people have said, there's no doubt that unless we are clean ourselves, the environment is already fighting back, and it's very, very dangerous for our corporate existence, in the sense that it will get to a level that it will be very difficult for us to even manage the environment. So this is the high time that all hands must be on the deck to ensure that we find a way of probably retracing our step to the order of nature. Because I used to say that, yes, when God created for those of us who believe in the Bible, when after the creation of everything, God looked at them and said, this is very, very good. But today, if God is to now go back, I will come back to look at the world, will it still maintain the same position? The answer is capital no, because we have actually done a lot of damage to the environment through our own activities, and forgetting that all these things will be there forever and ever. So, honestly speaking, if one say, oh, you have a ready-made answer to the solution of the environment, one is kidding himself. It's a very big question, which is difficult to answer, but we just have to ensure that all of us, we put mechanism in place to ensure that we don't experience disaster. Yes, because like John said, if you look at the population is a big problem too. And like I said before, that when you have more population, you actually, the population will rely on the environment for their survival. In terms of where they are going to live, that is shelter, what they are going to eat, and things and so on and so forth like that. So, and all these things are rubbing on the natural resources in the environment. So there must be a joint effort to ensure that we all address the issue of environmental degradation. And government has a big role to play. That's true, because I said this because, they are the one that actually hold the stick. They are the one who should be responsible enough to ensure that what is now, we're supposed to be enjoying together, that they ensure that they come to sustain it. Otherwise, it's going to be a disaster for them, because there is nowhere anybody will run to when it comes. Because we have virtually tried the world now, there's nowhere with their people are not talking about the climate change now. So it's a global issue. It's things that affect the entire world. So, and that's why government must rise to the occasion. Of course, there are quite numbers of maybe conventions, that there are a lot of programs going on there, but I don't think it should be left to the individual alone. Government too should also awake to ensure that we all fight it together, to ensure that we reverse the trend of things before it becomes too late for us to do something tangible. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Axel, your final word, please.
Thank you, Dr. Sunday, for those wise words. I truly echo that, and also what John said. I mean, in terms of environment fighting back, we've been seeing it for a long time, and one of the hidden spaces where the environment is fighting back that is less talked about as well, or is talked about, the ocean is suffering immensely from climate change, and that's another resource that we depend upon, and millions of people depend upon as their primary source of food. And so in terms, we need to listen to the environment, we need to think holistically, we need to think about justice, who has the ability but also the responsibility to turn this ship around, because we only have one ship, and that's the Earth. And it's you know, it's becoming increasingly alarming with the heat waves, for example, floods, droughts, and as that progresses, the environment will just keep pushing people around, basically forcing people to move. And that's something that, you know, uprooting people has never been an easy thing, and we will see the rise of climate refugees and conflicts as a result of that. So climate is fighting back the environment. The biodiversity and the richness of species is declining. So I think that we just need to act fast enough so that we don't snooze on this problem anymore, because it will just increase in severity, basically. But I think also it can be done, and we have technology, and that's also something where the developed countries need to assist in terms of using technology to kind of leapfrog to a more sustainable production across the board. So yeah, thank you very much for this interesting discussion of very, very difficult subject, and but important nonetheless. And I think organizations such as 11-11-12 Foundation plays an really important role in kind of inviting the public to listen and talk about these issues.
Thank you for your submission, Mr. Axel. Finally, but not the least, Mr. John, what are your final words on this topic?
Well, I believe that we need to keep doing what we are doing. We need to keep educating people. The environment will always fight back, and it's been clear, at least from last year, December, to now. So at least almost a year now, we've seen the impact of COVID-19. We've seen what will happen to us if the environment decides to fight back. And as my friends have said, the environment will fight back anyway. It is something you cannot do anything about. If you keep pumping carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, you attract heat. The heat will melt the glaciers. The sea level will rise. We are going to lose a lot of beaches. If you go to the US, in Miami, downtown Miami is almost underwater right now. And then you're talking, and even New York, where the Statue of Liberty is, they're talking about billions and billions of dollars. Well, come to my home country, Ghana, come to our beaches, go to Qatar, built a sea defense wall, yet people are losing their homes. Homes that were available, people were living in 15, 20 years ago are now under water. So it's real. The environmental problems are real. When the environment decides to fight back, we are the ones going to suffer. And so it is the reason why conferences like this are important for us to continue to educate the public and keep our governments responsible. Let's vote when we have to vote with our feet when we have to do that. And then my friends in the European and American world, at least Harvard here has acknowledged, and it's good, that they have a bigger role to play. They have benefited from the environment more than any group of people. So they have a bigger responsibility. It's called an equal but differentiated responsibility principle. That we all have equal responsibility to protect the environment, but it's differentiated in a way because of what the Europeans have benefited, because of what they've done to the environment. They have a bigger role to play right now to help support the developing countries so that we can also reach a particular level where we can be on our feet. And so it's a responsibility of the world. We all need to play our roles. And I'm sure that as we keep doing this, one day, I'm not sure whether it will happen in my lifetime. My friend is very optimistic that Sweden will be able to achieve net zero emissions in 2045. Good luck to them. I'm praying that they'll be able to do that. I don't know, China won't do that, America won't do that. Definitely, of course, course, Africa, we don't really emit a lot. So we'll see what the world go through, what all these developed countries have for the world in terms of net zero emissions. I'm not so optimistic, but I can only hope that everybody will be able to achieve that level to protect the environment. And so I thank you, 11-11-12. I thank you, Dr. Fagbemi. Thank you, Green. Hadzat, my moderator. I thank everybody who participated. I see members of Sweden also here on the line, and all the participants appreciate your time also. So thank you.
Thank you very much. And that's how we wrap up on the last webinar series that has held over the course of the last month. Once again, appreciations to my panelists, Mr. John Darko from Ghana, Dr. Sunday Fabemi from the University of Ibadan, and of course, Mr. Axel Hargreen from the Swedish Embassy here in Abuja. And to all the attendees, we couldn't say thank you enough. Of course, to EETF, thank you for organizing this webinar series. And that's how I say bye-bye and stay safe. But always remember, let's get to work for and not against the environment, because really, always ask yourself this: where do you always come back home to, if not on planet Earth? Stay safe and be good, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye, friends.
Bye-bye, friends.
Yeah.
Bye.